Archives live when archives give voice to living history makers. We get to hear while they are here their words to today's torch takers. Archives live when archives give a location where all the world's youth can virtually access or visit the address to learn Black history's truth. The Mid-America Black Archives are archives alive. The Mid-America Black Archives are archives alive.
Good afternoon and welcome once again to Black Archives Alive. My name is Carl Boyd and I have the distinct honor to bring you what has been deemed an important addition to the history of Kansas City, Missouri. So I always begin the program by saying thank you to Makita Peterson, daughter of founder of the Black Archives of Mid-America, Horace Peterson III. I say thank you also to Dr. Karma, who is the current executive director of the Black Archives of Mid-America. And I say thank you to the gentleman who is not on camera, but is certainly an integral part of the program, whose name is Luther Wilson, in whose studio we have the privilege of recording the program that is indeed called Black Archives Alive. Now, in that, this introduction will be truthful, but not as economical as it ought to be. Let me tell you what I mean, because I am about to introduce Mr. Rodney Bland. I look at interviews from time to time, Luther, and the interviewer spends so much time setting up the question that I say, well, shut up and let the guest talk. And then we do a program, and I look back and I say, I just did the same thing. Let the guest talk, because that's why we're here, to hear from the guest. So I am apologizing up front for the length of this introduction, but there is something that I absolutely must say, and why this is so important to me. In 1978, at the Mulebach Hotel, we held the Push Convention, Kansas City, Missouri. Will MacArthur was the director of Push for Excellence, Kansas City. I was the director of Chicago Push for Excellence. A gentleman whose name is Carl Sewell was the director in California, Push for Excellence. So our part in the Push Convention was that part that dealt with education. But here's the thing. 1978 was 2 years before I relocated from Chicago to Kansas City. And among the reasons I relocated was Mary Groves Bland.
I remember well.
It was just in 1978, Albert Anderson, Sherrill had not become Anderson yet, I think, but at any rate, Albert and Sherrill, Will MacArthur, and of course, Reverend Nelson Fuzzy Thompson, Reverend Hartsfield, all of those, but had such a positive relationship with leaders in the community, including your mom, so that when I came to Kansas City, Missouri in 1980, it was your mother at Newsom Real Estate, when Freedom was getting ready for the election, that I was introduced to Kansas City, Missouri. That is so important to me that I wanted to set up my asking you to introduce yourself with a truth that is absolutely important to my lifetime. And now, host, shut up and allow your guest to talk. If you would, Rodney Bland, please introduce yourself, and then we'll have an informal conversation.
Well, Carl, my dear friend, let me first say thank you for the memory of your beginnings here, as well as your involvement in my mother's first campaign against an opponent that was an incumbent. And let me first say, give grace to God and say, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Praise God.
I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I clearly see. So I wanted to offer that as an introduction to who I had become.
Yes, sir.
And my journey has been a journey, but I will say that I'm arrived here now and
Yes.
Present. But I would also offer that I started off as a community organizer with Neighborhood Housing Services, then went on to East Meyer Community Association, then went on to work at Prospect Association for Merchants and for Businesses Collective, then went on to work for the industrial, Dotson industrial area down 85th Street when they had Sears and other John Deere and other areas, and organized them. Then I went on to organize NHS and community projects.
Yes.
Through the Catholic Charities. I worked for them for a period of time and was actually trained on the Saul Alinsky approach to organizing. So I've had a journey through organizing.
Yes.
That has led me to campaigns that led me further into lobbying, and I became a lobbyist and a registered lobbyist in Kansas, Iowa, and Missouri, and at the federal level. And so I did that, and I've been doing that consistently for about 30 years.
Wow.
And continue to this day to have clients and businesses and groups that I represent in
Yes.
federal, state, and Kansas and Missouri. So also city of Kansas, Missouri, and the county of Jackson County, and school districts. So I continue on that voyage, but they're all about organizing still.
Yes.
All about organizing information, policy, developing and shaping legislation that impacts economically, socially our communities. And now I am currently at the starting, I guess I was 12, 13 years old, and my father was Jesse Bland, and he worked for Lakes Ammunition Plant, he and my mother both.
Oh. And
he became involved with the unions, and we were working at the fire station on 51st and Swope Parkway, across from Satchel Stadium. And that's when I first started passing out the ballot. And now I am currently the president of Freedom Inc.
The interesting thing to me, and interestingly enough, I was going to ask you to take us back to 12 or 13 years old, but you did. And I'll tell you why. There are many young people who may have similar aspirations, but there was something in your background, something in your associations, something that caused you to have the confidence in organizing and the contacts to be able to do the things that you have done. I'm just curious for those classrooms to whom you speak now and going back to that time. What gave you that kind of confidence to have the vision, but then tackle it?
Well, Mother was an amazing individual. And,
yes.
Mom was Land Clearance Redevelopment Authority. She was one of the organizers, along with Sylvia Rizzo. They had an office over on 38th Street, right off of Benton Boulevard. There used to be an office there, and she did the Land Clearance Redevelopment Authority and all of its similar operations. So all through our childhood, Mother worked very hard and raised 4 of us, and all of us went to private schools.
Yeah.
So Mom was very active as an organizer, a community organizer, as well as a housing specialist, as well as a community engaged person, but also as a mother. So we typically, she drug, I say drag, but drug.
Yeah, I understand.
But I understand. We didn't have babysitters back then.
Yeah.
But she ended up taking us with her to meetings, public meetings at night. And the community was always really engaged in. I mean, people don't really grasp the importance of block clubs, neighborhood watch groups, of interacting with people around you. Back then, I say back then, probably in the 1970s, mid-70s. Mother was always at community meetings. So a lot of times she would have us come meet her or stay with her throughout her evenings, going to meetings. And the organizing aspect of it, I think, caught hold. And then, of course, I got involved in doing canvassing with the great Philip Curls and Charles Hasley. And then that led us to get more involved with Freedom Inc.
Yes.
So those were kind of the roots of why I got engaged, because I saw the success of people's moving through issues that impact them at a day-to-day, street-to-street level.
Don't be surprised if you hear me say more than once the quote, children learn by example more than by instruction.
Oh, yeah.
And the second one is, I heard somebody mention, and you just repeated it in your own way, that they grew up with a drug problem. Their mother drug them to church, drug them to the meeting, and that's what you just reminded me of.
True that.
But the importance to me personally, as it relates to Mary Groves Bland, 1980, was she ran against Philip Scaglia.
Know well.
And he was a, quote, perennial winner, so to speak. What happened was, when Mary Groves Bland came along, people knew her. People knew the quality, not just of her candidacy, but what you pointed out, her experience, her background. So when I came on, and Phil Curls in his own way, you know how Phil is, Brother Boyd, you're going to be Sister Bland's manager. And I said, I am sorry, Brother Curls. I don't know anything about being a campaign manager. He said, I thought you said you were from Chicago. I said, I did. He said, okay, you're the manager. And he went on. But I only mention that because he happened to put me in the milieu of something that was fortunate in that particular campaign. Nobody was going to beat Mary Groves Bland. So I got to ride some coattails after just arriving here from Chicago, because she had the audacity to be integrous and faith-filled.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there were too few people who would let it be known, and I don't care who you are, but before you do that, we're going to pray about it. Or I am going to profess my faith. Your mother was a remarkable woman, and still is, in our hearts and our minds and in our souls. So when I was talking about taking you back, where'd you go to high school? Were your associates like-minded, or did you kind of stick out as that one?
Well, you know, we come from very humble beginnings, and still are very humbled about our beginnings. But I started off in Wayne Minor.
Okay.
High rises.
Okay.
My dad, mom, and my uncles all lived in Wayne Minor high rises, right there on 13th and Euclid.
Yes, sir.
And that's where we began. And about 5 or 6 years of age, we moved to South Kansas City, 61st Street, because back before then, black folks couldn't live south of 27th Street.
Yes, sir.
And so I think the young folk really forget the orientation of how black folks moved from downtown south. Okay. And now they're all moving back downtown or further south.
Interesting. Interesting. Yes, sir.
But we moved to south, 61st Indiana, 6135 Indiana. And my dad got more opportunity at the job. Mom began to work at Lexi Emination. They worked 2 different shifts. And so I went to St. Louis Grammar School. All of our siblings did. On 58 and Soul Parkways. It's now abandoned and no longer there. High school, I went to Bishop Hogan High School, and then played basketball. Was fortunate enough to go get a scholarship to go to Baker University in Baldwin, Kansas.
Is that right? Okay.
And I went to Baker University in Baldwin, Kansas. Played basketball my first year, My grade point average was 2.1. I'm sorry, 1.2. And they told me that if I did not raise it to 2.0, I was out.
Yes, sir.
And so I quit the basketball team.
Okay.
And lost my scholarship. But I became an ambassador
Okay.
for the university and helped
Wow.
recruit. And
wow, now that's interesting.
and then I went from there and started trying to regain my credits. And I joined Alpha Phi Alpha. I pledged and became a fraternity man and organizational man.
Yes.
See, I was a Cub Scout, Boy Scout, Eagle Scout.
Okay.
Then I became altar boy. Then I became a fraternity man.
Okay.
All organizations.
Okay.
So the organizational side of me became developed, and so I pledged, and then my grade point average, I graduated almost a double major, and cause my Alpha leads and brotherhood, I almost became I graduated with like a 3.4. Because I was in the library every day.
Yes, sir.
You know?
Yes, sir.
So from there,
Yes, sir.
I moved to coming back and doing the organizing side of it, working for NHS and other community organizing efforts, and all organized. Neighborhood housing services out of MPP, the National Preservation Program out of the federal government. That filtered monies to, I lived in South Hyde Park, and that's where I resided for a long time. So all of those evolutions of where I started and where I ended and where I am now, all were part of a transition.
Now, back in the 1970s, you must have pulled Jesse Jackson aside and talked to him, and I'll tell you why. He told your story. This is one. This is one of the things that Reverend Jackson used to love to do. And you know, he would start with, I am somebody, I am, and he would do that. And then for the Push Excel program, we're speaking at a high school. So here is the school basketball team. And he looks out at one of the players and says, come up here. And the basketball player comes up, and Reverend Jackson looks at him and says, so you're on the basketball team? Yes, sir, I'm on the basketball team. You do pretty well? Well, we had a good record last year. We're doing better. That's good. How much time you spend in the gym? So he said, well, we practice right after school. He said, I know you practice. I'm sure of that. How about weekends? So he would get the young person the expected answer, of course.
Confessing.
Exactly. And then he would turn it. How much time you spend in the library? And of course, he would look out at the young people in the audience and say, now let us develop the habit of spending as much time in the library as we do on the basketball court and see how you come out. He told Rodney Bland's story. That's precisely what you just said.
And it's a faithful truth. Cause,
yes, sir.
Yes,
sir.
I mean, literally, during our pledging season and thereafter, we had to spend, we pledged like 12 weeks. Abnormal. And I had to drive 13 miles to KU. I pledged at KU Upsilon chapter.
Yeah.
So I had to go to KU every day and every weekend. And then come back. Greg Hayes was my alpha partner. So we were two from Baldwin Baker, who drove every day up and back in class. And we spent like from 4 o'clock to 9 every day.
Well, there you go.
And then
yes, sir.
Then these young folks don't understand about hazing. And then we got hazed from like 9 to 12.
Yeah.
Then we drive back to Baldwin.
Let me tell you, I do indeed understand. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell you my own personal basketball story.
Okay.
Because I played basketball in high school.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, my very best friend, whose name was Robert Tops, used to call me Judge. Because I spent all my time on the bench. So you didn't have to worry about me getting a scholarship, brother. At least I got in to watch the games, but I was on the basketball team. But on a very serious note, as it relates to that development, your orientation, organizational skills, all of those kinds of things, one is ability, obviously. But the second thing to which you were introduced, and you mentioned Phil curls, so you cannot mention Phil curls without thinking about Fred curls. And then, of course, you think about origins of that with which you are affiliated. At what point was it more than just skills and being able to do what you did and taking a look at the landscape of what was very important in civil rights in your day?
Well, I think it really came down to I was back from college and I was working and I was doing community organizing and field curls, and I worked on Mark Hughes's campaign.
Okay.
Now Leonard Hughes Jr.'s
Wow.
campaign, and he was running against Doc Holliday's father.
Yes.
Doc Holliday Sr.
Yeah.
And I came home from college, and in the summer of 1978, we helped Leonard beat Judge Hughes, Judge Holliday. And so after that, I got more involved with Freedom again.
Yes.
And it was really in the organizing and doing the canvassing and doing the block-to-block stuff. I still do canvassing now because it's just part of who I am.
I know it.
But we, Phil Curls came to me and Charles Hasley and asked me, and I think Alan Wheat was involved in that too, and asked me to run against Phil Scaglia for state rep. And my uncle Marvin L. Groves was in the meeting with us, and I said to them, without really having foresight of the argument, I'm not going to do that. My mother's been out here working forever, and my uncle chimed in and said,
"Wow,
we're going to have Mom run."
Thank you.
And so that became another conversation, and then Congressman Cleaver, who was then just a city councilman, chimed in and said, "Oh, absolutely, Mary Bland's going to run." And so they were trying to get me to run to bring more youth into the game.
Of course.
And which is a consistent struggle that we have right to this day, bringing in younger people, younger ideas, progressive ideas, and motivating them to get more involved in politics, because all of us age out. And it's our duty to really bring younger folks in and up and through. But they've got to learn the process of orientation, organizing, commitment, and service, because none of us, and you know Mom well, Mom would not, as a state rep or a state senator, she wouldn't take on jobs. Mr. Ollie Gates was always trying to recruit Mom to come work with him. And she would never work with him. They were best friends. Because she always said that I was elected to serve. And I don't want to ever serve and have a conflict, even with you, Ollie. And so Mother, through all her career, 24 years in Jefferson City, in the Capitol,
that's right,
she remained humbled and service. Bob Holden, when he became governor, Bob Holden offered Mother a $120,000 job in 2002.
I didn't know that. Wow.
For PSC, Public Service Commission.
Wow.
When she was state senator and she had like 2 years left on her term. And we all begged her, take it. And she said, I'm not going to take any job. I was elected to serve. Even though I'm terming out, I'm going to serve to the end of my term. And because people deserve, they elected me, I'm going to serve my 4 years. And she had been there 20 years.
So
that's the kind of woman she was. That's the kind of example she led. And her commitment was service. People put her down there to serve their interests.
It was interesting to me. 1982, she ran against Earl Pitts. But 1980, Freedom Incorporated, the black community, but primarily Freedom Incorporated, sent 6 state reps to Jeff City.
First time in history a black vote.
My goodness. And what I did not understand, even though Phil Curls wanted to give me credit for being a politician, having grown up in Chicago, but that was in 1980.
Mm-hmm.
It never occurred to me that was a 0 year.
Mm-hmm.
Being a 0 year, redistricting,
Mm-hmm.
you had 6, but now you wanted Mary Groves Bland to run against Earl Pitts.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted Alan Wheat to run against Orchid Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
So that you had that kind of dynamic. And I don't know, you would know, who said to Alan Wheat that he might run for Congress rather than run against the widow, Orchid Jordan.
Well, you remember, and I want to go back just for a second before I answer that, because you remember one of the strategies of the campaign for Mother was her initial campaign against Phil Scaglia. Even though you say you want a campaign manager, you were probably absolutely the person for the campaign to manage, because you were the one that came with that theme song for Mama. And people to this day, Carl, on the way over here, I was thinking about the song that you sang, and we recorded and we put it on the radio. To this day, there are people who still remember that song from Mother.
I cannot believe.
And so what happened was, every time they redistrict, every time, in my opinion, every time black folks get power, and they concede and they consolidate their power for the interest of our black people in our wards, freedom wards, there always comes about folks, they want us to run against each other and create this chaos within our community. They put Mom against Earl Pitts. Now, I loved Earl Pitts. Mm-hmm. Earl Pitts was a great guy, but he wasn't Mother. He was a different tear of the cloth, as they say. Republicans loved him down there.
Yes.
They hated Mother.
I remember well.
She was a social advocate.
I remember very well.
She cared about kids, children, families, and mothers and fathers in our community. And then they wanted Orchid Jordan to run against Alan Wheat. Yep. And I think the evolution of that, because that year they had Tyndall. Bishop Tyndall was a state rep. Mm-hmm. Bishop Daniels, Allen, Orchid, Mother, Earl Pitts. I think that's the gamut of. But they try to shrink us from 6 to 4.
Yes.
And so they exploded our district representation. And Allen decided that he thought he had enough support, because he just came off a race with Pat Cowan Skaggs. Mm-hmm. Remember, Pat Cowan Skaggs, the Jackson County legislature ran against him, and he beat her.
Wow.
And Phil Curls, we were on 31st and Mungal, and Phil Curls in his office there, and Phil Curls asked Allen, he said, "Man, why are you running so hard against Pat Cowan Skaggs? She's a Jackson County legislator. Mm-hmm. She ain't no threat to you." Mm-hmm. And Alan Wheat said something I'll never forget, that I always remember, forward any campaign. He said, "Phil, I'm running as if I'm running for Congress. Because you got to lose by one vote and you're done. So I run as if I'm always scared." And he ran, and of course he beat Pat Cowan Skaggs, and he went on to beat John Sharp, Councilman John Sharp, who ran against him for Congress. Yes. And I remember that field of 13 that came out in first race, and they had 7 Republicans. So with 20 people in that race for 5th District Congressman. And Allen came out, and John Sharp came out, Republican and Democrat, and Allen won. He won when they always count Freedom Inc. last. They always count the black vote last. And he won because he was getting ready to concede. We were over on Swole Parkway. Mm-hmm. And Archie came in and was screaming at, Archie Wells came in and was screaming at Allen, "Don't concede, don't concede. The black vote didn't come in yet.
Come on."
And then the black vote came in, Allen whooped him.
Watch out.
And so,
watch out.
Every 10 years, they do this redistricting stuff. And every 10 years, our numbers shift, our boundaries shift.
Yes.
And and if you watch the migration of where we started in the 3rd district to where we are now, the geographical boundaries, it's moving further south. And that moves the 5th district further south. Then moves 6th district further south, west, and east. And so in 10 years, the third, the fifth, and the sixth will look very different than how they look now.
Yes, sir.
Because our population is migrating and moving further south and east. Lee Summit, Raytown, Grandview.
There's something that please educate me on and those who are with us. I think in terms of the evolution of elections from that time. So one of the things please speak to is youth for freedom, come young adults for freedom, and looking at the landscape today, that evolution and some of what we need to do. I will never forget coming here and being at 5501 Cleveland, and I'm in the presence of Fred Curls. I did not meet Leon Jordan. As a matter of fact, in 1980, Bruce R. Watkins was very ill, but was very sick. That's when was it Councilman Cleaver then? Was he what was he at that time?
A preacher.
So he wasn't, but he went to Bruce R. Watkins' bed to let him know we did it.
No, you're right. He won in 79. Cleaver won in 79.
Yeah. So, but at any rate, then when we looked at the young people like Keith Brown, like other people who were the young people of that time, young people saw, if not a need, an opportunity to become involved and learn. That evolution, 1980, 2023, how have we progressed, or have we?
That's a very complex question.
Okay.
And it probably needs to be answered in a categorical way.
Wow.
Because back then, as you remember, Mom had on 6th and Prospect at Newsom's office, when we gathered to go do a campaign.
Yes, sir.
We had 100 people.
Yes, sir.
On the hill.
Without a
walking
doubt.
them doors.
Yes, indeed.
100 people. The
I
evolution
that so well.
of Missouri ethics laws and Republicans' push to desecrate our voting rights and our voting power, even doing redistricting as they try to gerrymander us away from our own interests. They've done a very good job of dispelling, because now on the Missouri ethics laws, there are a lot of things you can no longer do that we did in the 80s and 90s and 2000s.
Okay.
Such as, you can't recruit money for campaign workers. We used to have volunteers everywhere, and we would help them get opportunity to be in the pool for contracts or for opportunity for jobs. Yes, or we always negotiate with whoever department it was that one of the things we want out of it, we don't want any money, we just want contracts or we want jobs. And so the Republicans shut that down. Secondly, I would tell you, Reverend Ron Lindsay, Keith Brown, Minister Keith Brown, myself.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Kathy Brown.
Kathy Brown. I mean, there was Keith Curls, Senator Curls. We were all Darwin Curls. We were all a part of Young Freedom.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
And it was all about trying to raise the next generation of electors and voters into getting engaged in freedom and keep freedom evolving.
Yes, indeed.
Because the only way we evolve is we bring new people in, new ideas in, new progressive ideas in, and those that have activism ideas, and help them reshape our thinking about how we go out and promote for the interests of Black people, interests of our 12 wards, to make them have a part of the rationale about why we make decisions on candidates, on issues, because everything we do impacts the very person at the base level of streets. And so we're very intentional about how we recruit, how we get involved with people. Since I've been president of Freedom in the last 2 years, 21 to now, I voted unanimously by the board. We have 19 board members.
Praise God.
And I was voted unanimous to be
Praise
the president. God. We had co-presidencies, and the board decided we wanted one president.
Okay.
Back to when Phil was president and Mom was president.
Yes.
And Archie. And so I became president. And since then, I recruited probably 50 people. And I've got them memberships now, probably 35. And I'm still trying to recruit, bring more people in, because if we don't bring new ideas in, we become stagnant.
Yes.
And become self-serving.
Yes.
And my objective has been always to include, to be broader.
Yes, indeed.
And Phil used to say that even when we have somebody run against us, if they are palatable to our interests,
yes, I've seen it.
Then bring them in
an
organization.
I've seen it.
And we've done that.
I have seen it since 1980. And two things I'd like for you to address. One being personal, and that is the Bland family. And just those who have kept up the family legacy. And then the second thing that I think about that is remarkable, in Chicago, Illinois, where I grew up, there was a weekend black paper, the Chicago Defender. As a matter of fact, the Chicago Defender eventually became a daily paper. But in Chicago, being black, you waited for the Defender's editorial board to print who they would be voting for. And we would wait for the Defender ballot. You're talking about, I met your family in 1978. It is 2023. Black people continue to wait for the Freedom ballot. How have you maintained that integrity to the point where if they don't see it soon enough or something, you'll get calls?
We get flooded with calls. And I think it goes back to our efforts that continue to be the staple mark of what we try to do. I tell people all the time, there are 19 board members, executive board members. Okay. There's probably about 145 plus people who are members, paid due members. I think what happens is, it's like trying to organize ministers. You know how tough that is, right? And especially if you're not a minister. Yeah. But trying to organize and trying to hold together the interests of former elected officials. Yes. Because there's 19 board members, all of which 4 of us have never been elected for office. Okay. I'm one of the 4. Okay. Dr. Holiday's one of the 4. So having those elected officials from the city, state, county, school board, city council, all of those folks have their own generation of people and interests. So the consistency of our ballot has always been the integrity of what we do with our nominating process. Our nominating process goes through a structure. And I was chairman of the nominating committee after following Fuddy Thompson, the great Fuddy Thompson, and God bless his soul. Yes, sir. But he was nominating committee chair for about 15 years. Yes, sir. And so he served Phil Curls, Archie Welch, and my mother very well. When he was in his latter years and passing forward to glory, he asked me, and Phil asked me to take on the chair. So I did that, and for a period of time, I did that now, and I did it for, probably for the last 11 years before I became president in 21. So back to 2010, and the nominating committee process was a full committee that did all the elections. And when I became president, and a little before, Dr. Holiday and Senator Curls, they bifurcated the committees. So now we have a committee that deals with city issues and city candidacies, and I have a chair and 7 members of Freedom. I have a Jackson County chair and a committee of 7 that deal with Jackson County issues and candidacies. We have a school board committee, nominating committee, and that's all teachers, 2 PhDs on that 7-body committee.
Yes.
That's all's on there. Teachers, master's degree, and educators and doctorates. And then we have on the let's see, I'm missing one. State. The state campaign does all statewide issues, all state relatable candidacies or issues. And that's all former state reps. They can't be electable. They can't be elected. They gotta be former. So all those committees have people who are former city councilmen, who are former city employees.
Man.
So every committee is set up so that I make sure that those chairs or those committee members have particular experience in that field of that interest.
Now, you said something earlier we were talking about, and I was involved in it because it was your mom's second campaign, 1982, Earl Pitts. And when we got into that discussion, you were saying that there were times when we had opponents, but not enemies.
Yeah.
And when you look in 2023 at national politics today, you ask the old cliche-ish question, who's running the asylum, and how do we get back the opportunity for people to, how many times have we heard Phil say, and others, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. We grew up with that. As a child, you heard that. But creating a climate where, quote, there's an adult in the room, unquote. And we might indeed disagree upon some things. But I saw freedom as paving the way. You could be totally upset at 2 p.m. and at the Conference Cove at 7 p.m. having a drink together or something like that.
It's a different view, because continuing our discussion of why is the ballot still important to our community, our mantra still exists after 62 years. No permanent friends, no permanent enemies, permanent interest. The permanent interest is our constituency that we serve in our 12 wards. And those interests supersede
Thank you.
Any individual interest on the board of Freedom. People don't believe that, but I run so many campaigns, statewide issues, and candidacies. Well, we've turned down 6 figures on a subject because we didn't believe that it best fit our community. We have turned down, and people don't understand that and don't realize that, but they criticize us as if we're money mongrels and hungry for money. We have turned down candidacies and campaign and issues that I can point to with clarity, that we were offered 6 figures just to run that deal. And we said no, because it was, the impact to our community was so egregious and regressive that we didn't think that we had the right to make that discussion.
Wow. And
so in that line of trying to stay forthright and trying to stay in the center of our interests of our community, do we partner with organizations and groups and cities or politicians for better jobs, for better opportunity, for more inclusion with unions? We had the same arguments we had before in the 80s, we have now with unions, with the police department, with the fire department. Black folks, getting black folks more jobs, more opportunity, more involvement. And I can tell you my experience as president, I've seen the evolution of that coming forward. In private business, in construction,
Yes.
we're seeing that, we're trying to get people more engageful and more engaging because politics is a business. And it's a social interactive business geared toward voting and representation. Well, you don't have the same views, and we disagree on a lot of stuff. But back then, Carl, Black folks had a common purpose.
Okay.
It wasn't so much who's caging the animals.
Yeah.
It was like, what cage you want everybody to be in.
Wow.
Is it one big cage or these separate cages?
My goodness.
And I think that, and that's a socioeconomic argument, but I think what is happening now from 1980 to 2023 is that people would rather shoot at us or make these derogatory comments about freedom and me or anybody that's opposing their candidacy. But I would tell you, Carl, every campaign, particularly the city council races, we used to have 50 people interview with freedom. Everybody hates freedom. But when it comes to elections,
Come on.
everybody came to our committee and we would spend hours,
Yes.
40, 50 hours
Yes, sir.
interviewing people
Yes, sir.
running for different city council, mayoral office. In 2015, we had, and even in 2019, we had 11 people running for mayor. That's just one
sir.
interview process, right?
Yes, sir.
We had
Yes, sir.
6 or 7 running in different
Yes, indeed.
jurisdictions.
Yes,
So we do I gotta give it to our nominating committees that volunteer to assemble and screen through with a questionnaire we develop for every race, every categorical race. We have a screening process that includes 20 and 27 questions germane to that particular body of interest, state, city, county,
Yes, sir.
whatever.
Yes, sir.
And so if you're interviewing for a job, as all candidates are, that's a job. They
Yes,
get paid
that's
to go
right.
be a state rep, be
That's
a city
right.
councilor, be a county legislator.
Yes, sir.
Now, school boards aren't paid, but everybody else is. And if you're interviewing for a job as a candidate, it's a job. You ought to know something about the corporation you're going to serve. City Hall, people forget. City Hall is city councilmen. They get over $70,000 a year. They get $78,000 a year, somewhere around there. But City of Kansas City, Missouri, that's a $2 billion operation. That's a corporation. And within that corporation,
least.
there are stages of economic opportunity that impact our community
Wow.
dramatically. And when people come to screen, they ought to understand a corporation, its entities, its departments. They ought to understand what an ordinance does. How do you get there? You ought to understand basic math.
My goodness. Well, one of the things that you made me mindful of when we were talking about backgrounds, please, if you don't mind,
Yeah, sure.
name family members who have been involved in this public service.
From the Bland Fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so mother was a state rep, and then she became a state senator.
Yeah.
She served 24 years, 25 years in the capital of Jeff City. And what people don't understand is that means driving 2.5 hours back and forth every week. And then they went from January to mid-May. And they still do that now. But mom was on the road all the time.
Let me tell you real quickly something, and then I want to get back to the question, but you make me mindful of something. There have been people, astute politicians, who wanted to admonish Senator Bland for having the audacity to stand in public and profess her faith. Even to the point of wanting to pull her aside. You can't do that. You can't. She was always who she was. Period.
No doubt.
But please, go ahead.
So, mother was the first African-American senator she was a state rep then, that walked out of the governor's speech when John Ashcroft took $1 million out of the coffers and draped the statues at the Capitol, because he said that the genitalia of the people were being seen, these giant 20-foot statues, and decided that they were gonna take $1 million and put it on the statues. Mom walked out in the middle of his State of the State address protesting that first, and she did several times, but that was who she was. And so Mom was there, and Craig became a state rep, her district, same district, and he served 8 years.
That was 43rd district?
That's 43rd district. Now I think it's 36 something. They changed the title.
Yes.
But same geographical.
Yes, sir.
And then Craig served 8 years, and then Ashley Bland Manlove, my niece, she became a state rep, and she's now at this end of this 2024 term.
Indeed.
She'll be six years in.
Yes, indeed.
So they've continued that legacy.
Now it leads me to this question, and I want to make sure that before we go, that you say precisely, don't leave something unsaid that I should have asked and neglected to ask. But the question that comes to so many people's minds, in as much as that, of course, is a distinguished family legacy, tradition, hard work for a long time. And if you look back, you probably surprise yourself at how many years have indeed passed by. And I'll mention something in this, or somebody casually will say something. You say, wow, that happened back in whatever. What keeps you going?
You know, I think service, belief in the constituency's interest in trying to always understand that voting is, people think voting is a right, and it is. It's 1968. It is, but it's also a privilege.
Yes.
And with these younger people who think they've arrived on their own.
Oh boy.
I can't say these Republicans are not just Republicans. There's a body of activists who are trying at every level of state government. And I'm in Jeff City every week.
Yes, sir.
During January to May. And the legislation that comes through Jeff City, if people took the time to read some of that stuff, they would be horrified as to what they're trying to do to black and brown people.
Come on.
And even people on white folk who are on the lower tier of that poverty line, because they don't really have an interest in their interests. And so for me, it's all about trying to be sure that as freedom moves forward, because we're always thinking about the next steps, the next protective measures, the next opportunity to employ people, the next ability to do housing. Let me just go back just for a second. And also, I'm also encouraged by the young folk that are coming forward and some of the other folk. I was telling somebody the other day, people talk about, all these older people that have been around politics forever, what do they know? And I was telling somebody just the other day, the privilege I have being here, and God's blessed me with the opportunity to stay here and don't know what next, but I can look back to all these races, all these different categorical candidates, because I was there. I was young, but I was there. I was there with a notepad all the time. Yes. Charles Hass used to always tell me, "Stop taking notes, man. We're in a private meeting." But you had Phil Curls. Yes. Then Melba Curls became a state rep. Phil Curls was state rep, state senator. Mel became a state rep, city councilwoman. Shalonda Curls was a state rep, state senator. Curls. Now Darwin Curls
Yeah.
was a school board member.
Yes.
And he went on to work for Cleaver, Congressman Cleaver in his office.
That's right.
As chief of staff. And then you had, now you got Darryl Curls.
That's right.
Who's city councilman. So,
Wow.
So there, and I go back to Charles Hasley, who was a city councilman. They changed the charter of city council after 100 years because they could not get rid of Charles Hasley in 3rd District councilman because he was P&Z chair for like 12 years. Really? And now his daughter-in-law, Melissa Patterson Hasley, is a city councilman.
My goodness. Before BCC, the Black Community Coalition, 1985, Reverend Mac Charles Jones. There was a meeting with Stedman, Dick Berkeley, Downtown Civic Council, a number of different people, and they wanted to meet with the black community. So here was...
Michael Fisher was part of the organizing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Had forgotten about him.
Yeah.
And here we are around this table, and you will not believe that Stedman actually asked in these words, "What do you people want?" What in the cliche of terms, but Charles Hasley just kind of
cussed him out.
Not exactly. He took a deep breath and he looked around and he said, and these were, I think 100% white males. I cannot remember female in leadership. That was but at any rate, Charles Hasley said, you gentlemen address what you consider to be, quote, the black question, unquote, when you get around to it. Mm-hmm. We have to be black 24 hours a day, every day. And the way that he did it, the way he treated it, was so classy that the whole tenor of that engagement changed in a very serious way. Mm-hmm. But it was such a salient point. And here we are, 2023. March 3rd was my 81st birthday. And my wife will tell you, I am still black. We've been black a long time.
Can't change that.
So that when you look around the landscape today, and I was wondering the ability of that freedom ballot to still be, I'm not only talking local politics. How many phone calls, how many letters, how many messages nowadays, how many texts do you receive from well out of town in terms of this area?
I would tell you that freedom continues to be sought out because we're the only, Missouri Ethics Commission will tell you that Freedom Inc. is the only organization in the state of Missouri that is engaged in every election. If there is a dog catcher election, we're going to be involved. Because ours is an informative collaboration and sort of an educational process to engage our electorate to what the pros and cons are of the measure, of the candidacies. Because just because you're black don't mean you have the same intentions for our community. And we've seen that, and I can name some individuals. I won't.
Yes, sir.
But just because I don't want to, get a dozen phone calls about who I said. Mm-hmm. But from our perspective.
Yes, sir.
So we have to be very, very intentional about who we put on our ballot, how we perceive them, even when statewide race is coming up in August in the presidential. And one of the things I didn't mention, but I want to say, Congressman Cleaver, who's been a part of us more when he's a mayor and more when he's a city councilman. I mean, he was actually a member. He attended the meeting. He and Diane attended meetings. But now more as a congressman, he kind of sees a broader view.
Yes.
But his kind of leadership
yes.
is a continuation of Mother, of field of Alan Wheat and all those folks that really changed Charles Hasley, because he has all those aspects of all the Bruce Watkins.
Wow.
He has all those aspects of all those folks, including his clergy, including the ministers are very important ingredient of who we are and who we were and who we're going to become. Because without his kind of stewardship and leadership and guidance and support, I think that we could get off course at times.
Well, I'll tell you, based upon February 18th, 1961, 2:44 p.m., I owed a chapter Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. I don't mind him also being one of your fraternity. One of your fraternity brothers.
Yeah, he is Alpha. I know you were Kappa.
Yes, sir.
Oh man. Okay.
But let me ask you, please, because there are so many challenges in today's world, and there are those who would like to ask questions of you, but also those who would like to volunteer, who would like to become a part. And if you would just give contact information, events, whatever it might be, would you please do that?
Freedom Inc. has a Facebook post, Instagram.
Yes.
We're on all the media platforms. It's Freedom Incorporated, spelled completely out, and .org.
Yes.
And you go to that website, all of our information on there, including our membership, including our calendar, including our candidacies, including our ballot. Every election we post all that information, and we now have a media person handling all our media stuff, because this generation and going forward, they are more in tune with that, and that's a great thing. But thank God for the people who still like to get in the mail. So we still do all our instruments.
Okay.
And now we're now
glad to hear
that.
Because I'm among them.
and we're getting ready to add another element to our campaigns that I hadn't thought about, but based on these elections and how they turn out, we're going to add another component, because people get snippets of someone's candidacy or issue or personality. What they fail to look at, and I'll give you a clear example, and I tell people this all the time. When they did the Healthy Homes measure in 2017, and everybody was criticizing Freedom for not supporting that Healthy Homes measure, the reason we didn't support the Healthy Homes measure, because we saw there was a gap in the safety net to catch people who called in on their landlord and report them to the city, and then the city would go inspect them, write a citation, and make them make the repairs, and in doing so, the landlord retaliate, kick out the person,
Right.
and that family.
Okay.
So then where they go
Yes.
for refuge became homeless, because there wasn't a built-in safety net program that would take them to a hotel for 6 months or 6 days or whatever. So when I get it all the time, people call and want to know they got put out because they curtained the landlord in, and the landlord evicted them, or the landlord put them out. The city's coming in and do repairs, and it could be some of these residencies, these absentee landlords who are not in Kansas City or not. Some of these places were horrific, and families living in some horrific environments, conditions.
Yes,
spiders, rats, floorboards rotted out, all kind of stuff. So we opposed it. We got criticized heavily, but the board maintained that there should have been some mechanism of some kind of support tax embedded in that language that would have had a safety net to catch people who reported, so they wouldn't have any fear reporting. If you're going to get evicted because you report your landlord, then why would you report the landlord?
Yeah.
You'll suffer through the conditions.
Makes sense.
But if you report the landlord and you have somewhere safety to go to for 6 months while you do repairs, and one of the guarantees is if you report them, you can't evict them. They got to go to a hotel or somewhere to live for 6 months, do repairs, and move them back in. And you couldn't raise the rents. So those were the cap points that we thought were important for that measure. That was, and our thoughts were that was protecting the person, the resident, not trying to protect the landlord, who could go back in, renovate it, kick them out, and raise the rent.
All right. Now let me ask that you prepare whatever final statement you want to make. Before you do that, I'll make my statement, and then after you do that, I will close.
Okay.
But my statement right now, looking squarely, I hope, at the camera pretty much, let me say unequivocally that my privilege at being involved with campaigns could never legitimately claim that Mary Groves Bland won an election because of a jingle I made up. I am honored, I'm flattered, but seriously speaking, her integrity, the kind of campaign that was run, walking up to doors, knocking, passing out literature, learning how it is done in Kansas City, Missouri, and indeed the true legacy of Freedom Incorporated that she represented at the time. She was fully responsible for her election. Thanks for complimenting me and allowing that claim. But as we close out, something that you want to make sure you say that our onlookers should hear.
I would say that for people in the community that have our vested interest, we have their vested interest. Please come and be a part of our continuing struggle. It's a continuing political struggle that's only getting worse. As our voters don't vote in our wards, and other wards vote more heavily at every election, we're only hurting ourselves. Because when we don't vote, when our constituents don't vote in our wards, you're actually voting for the other person or the other issue. If it was a yes/no issue and you don't vote, the measure will win because you didn't vote. So my goal is to bring more people in, and you can go to our freedomincorporated.org site and look on there, and you can find a membership application. You can find how to get to us, our phone number, and also realizing that your vote matters. It matters in every single election. And when we don't vote, we harm not only ourselves, but our children and our grandchildren. Because in the end days of this democracy, we're going to be impacted greater than anyone else. The black and brown community will be impacted dramatically. You got in Jeff City, the legislature is controlled by a super majority Republicans, and they are becoming more and more ultra conservative. And if we're not careful, we will see our elections, our voting rights diluted to a point that if you look at the last 4 years of the changes that the Secretary of State has made to all the voting right privileges that we fought hard and died for, they're changing and modifying them and becoming more restrictive. And, there's a measure coming up in next session that is on the table right now for discussion. And Carl, you allow me to sit down in a minute. If you don't register a party, now get this, folks, not only do you have to register, but you have to declare a party in 2024 election. If you do not declare a party, you will not be allowed to vote. That's another catch pen they're putting into the legislation. It hasn't passed yet in Jeff City, but they're working to pass it or some variation thereof. So not declaring a party in a democracy, I think it's called independent voting, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm not a Democrat
Yes,
or
sir.
Republican. I'm an independent.
Yes, sir.
But or libertarian or whatever. So I need to have the message clear that freedom is only a vessel toward your interests, and trying to maintain a consistency in protection measures of elections and informational. We don't try to steer you to tell you where to go to vote or how to vote. We just give you the information about how we vetted the candidacy or the issue to a point of analysis that says this is the best direction for our community. But even with that, you still got to go out and vote. Finally, I would say in 2008, in the 12 Freedom Wards, when President Obama was running, we voted 56,000 people in our registered wards for President Obama in Missouri. In 2012, we voted 54,000 in the 12 Freedom Wards. In 16, with Hillary Clinton, we voted 25,000 in the Freedom Wards. In 2018, Claire McCaskill, we voted 23,000 in the Freedom Wards. Folks, our numbers are going in the wrong direction. And you must, to protect your interests of yourself, your families, and your children, and their grandchildren, and your grandchildren, and their children, in the next 10 years, we can see the dramatic erosion of our voting rights in Black folks. So please, register to vote, go vote, vote every election, even if it is not agreeable with you. Vote yes, vote no, against the freedom ballot. That's not important. What's important is go vote.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, Carl.
Rodney Bland, President, Freedom Incorporated, Black Archives Alive. My name is Carl Boyd. Gracious God and wonderful Wanda. I'm on my way home.
Archives live when archives give voice to living history makers. We get to hear while they are here their words to today's torch takers. Archives live when archives give a location where all the world's youth can virtually access or visit the address to learn Black history's truth. The Mid-America Black Archives are archives alive.